over to you now.
All right, fantastic. Many thanks for people attending today. We've been up to some really, really exciting work in the 424 team, and it's just my pleasure to be able to share that with you today. So the first thing we're going to do is just talk really briefly about some things that came recently that aren't actually part of the release, but I think are recent enough and important enough that they bear mentioning to make sure that we're all on the same page about them. And then I'm going to talk us through the release itself. The big parts of the release certainly are the grants.gov header, which is something you don't need to worry about. It's a connection method that's changed with grants.gov that we've taken care of. As always, we've made some updates and additions to forms. We've made some exciting improvements to fringe rates, lots of validation changes, big changes, improvements to validate or to attachments. And as always, we've just done some maintenance within the system to keep it up to date. So some of those things that happened very recently prior to the release. So the first thing here is that the research.gov system-to-system service was decommissioned by NSF. And I really want to reiterate that the research.gov system-to-system service is a different thing entirely from NSF's research.gov system, which is replacing Fastlane. It's just the system-to-system service that they have decommissioned that is no longer functioning. And what basically happened is that back in the days of the Recovery Act, when there was so much load on grants.gov system-to-system, NSF created an alternative system-to-system method. Cayuse 424 was the only system-to-system provider that implemented that method. And so since the Recovery Act up until very recently, anytime you applied to NSF through Cayuse 424, you would actually see two opportunities download, one that was going to go to research.gov and one that was going to go through grants.gov to NSF. And really all that's gone away is that second alternate option from NSF to submit directly to NSF. Submitting to NSF through grants.gov is still there. It works just fine. In fact, what this allows NSF to do is to really put more of their time and effort into making grants.gov system-to-system work even better, since they're not going to be trying to support two different system-to-system services anymore. So again, what I really want to drive home here is that research.gov is not going away. It's just the system-to-system service, and NSF support is not going away from Cayuse either. Certainly, if you have any questions about that, please don't hesitate to write those in. Yeah, anyway, just wanted to make sure that what is happening and what is not happening is clear for all of us. The next thing that happened pretty recently is we released our first integration with Pivot. And the development was actually on Pivot's side, which is why you didn't necessarily get release notes from us. But here is basically what's happening. If you are a Cayuse institution and a Pivot institution, you can now configure to have your Pivot opportunities include a button that says Start Proposal in Cayuse. And what will happen based on a very simple configuration that either we can help you with or Pivot can help you with is that your users can see that button, and when they click on it, if you have 424 only, it will initiate a proposal in 424. And if you have 424 in SP, it will initiate the proposal in SP. Certainly more to come on additional integrations with Pivot, but this is where we've started to be able to allow for quick navigation from the opportunity to the proposal you'd be creating in Cayuse. And this next page just talks in a little bit more detail of what I just mentioned, that there is integration directly to SP if you have both SP and Cayuse 424. In the event that you have just 424, the integration will look a little bit different depending on if you're initiating the proposal from a federal opportunity or a non-federal opportunity based on the logic within those different kinds of opportunities. And we do have a contact here at Cayuse. If you want to hear more about the integration, let's say you don't have Pivot, but this makes getting Pivot compelling to you, please get in touch with Sarah Brewington, and she can help you figure out the best next step. And without further ado, let's talk about the release that is coming out this Saturday. So the first thing that bears notice, so much so that it gets its own slide, is the importance of clearing cache. You don't need to clear cookies, just cache, so you don't need to get rid of passwords and other pieces of information that I don't like to get rid of either. But the reason clearing cache is so important for this release is that we've made a lot of front-end changes to the user interface, and you just won't see all of them if you haven't cleared your cache. So once this release comes out, please do that, and we'll include that in the release announcements as well to give you that reminder. All right, excuse me. As I mentioned earlier, a big part of our release is Header 2.0 or Header 2, and this is a change that's happening on the grants.gov end. So as a system-to-system provider, we make this change on your behalf. Grants.gov Header 2 utilizes a field called package ID, which is a unique identifier. I just really want to stress that there's nothing about Header 2 that requires any work or coordination on your end. It's a behind-the-scenes piece of logic that we have made adjustments to on our end on your behalf. However, what would be potentially interesting to you within the system itself is that because Header 2 relies so heavily on package ID, we have made package ID something that you can search by or just identify throughout your opportunities. You certainly don't have to use it. You can still rely on opportunity number and or CFDA number. But you can see here in the screenshot that we do also offer the ability to search by package ID in the event that that's useful to you. And in the image behind it, that we also display package ID on the Opportunities tab. So again, there's nothing that you have to do regarding package ID. It's just an additional option we've provided, given the fact that package ID is becoming so important at grants.gov. Federal form updates and additions. We have one form that has a new version, the USDA 80-3030. So we supported that previously. This is just the new version of that. And then you can see below that the new forms that we now support that we didn't support earlier. So the HHS Objective Work Plan, 3 low-income taxpayer clinic treasury forms that are often bundled together in the same opportunities, and also the DOJ COP short application attachment. We covered these additional forms because they were the forms we heard most frequently about by Cayuse 424 users. So we hope that there are many people in the webinar today who are very happy to have these forms covered now, that they'll make your lives easier. And I also just want to encourage you that if there's a form that you really wish we covered that we don't yet, please don't hesitate to get in touch with support or frankly anyone at Cayuse that you're comfortable speaking with, so we know what your priorities are, so we can work that into our into the work that we're doing for upcoming releases. So the next thing is 2 changes we've made to fringe rate calculation. And what I want to say to start with is that if the way that we currently calculate fringe is working for you, there's nothing about this change that's going to force a change on you. You can keep using it the same way that you have been. However, we have added these new options because they are important options for some of our customers who haven't been able to use our budgeting quite the way that they would like. So the first thing is that we now have a separate line for fringe rate IDC category. Just going to mouse over here a little bit to give it some emphasis. That top screenshot shows you the current state where we currently have salary, wages, and fringe benefits all together in one line. So whatever indirect cost type you set for it is what gets set for both salaries and wages and fringe. And what we've done in this release is we've broken out salaries and fringe separately from fringe benefits. So this way, if you have a different IDC rate for fringe, including perhaps you don't apply IDC to fringe, you can now manage those 2 things separately. You'll see in bullet 2 here that because they were all bundled together, we are by default putting both values into both of these new lines. So that way nothing changes for you unless you go in and choose to make a change. You certainly don't want to make any changes to your budgeting logic behind the scenes that aren't what you intend to have happen. The other fringe rate change that we've made is to allow for fringe rate escalation of senior key people. You'll see again in the box up above that we previously did not include fringe benefits as an escalation option for senior key persons. And so what you'll see as of the Saturday release is that you're now going to have one line for salary and one line for fringe, like you already had for other personnel. Because fringe for senior key people was never part of the escalation logic in the past, we're going to be defaulting to 0, again in the spirit of not changing your calculations without you going in and intentionally making the change. But you now have that bucket to be able to utilize in the event that that's useful to you. All right, next thing. We made a lot of validation improvements specific to attachments, and I'm not going to talk about those quite yet because a lot of that is going to be what we see in the live demo portion. But let's just talk for a minute about the other kinds of validation updates we made in this release. So first of all, both FDA and HRSA have recently published much more kind of broad-ranged validation logic across their agencies. So given that that information now exists, we were able to create validation types for both FDA and HRSA that can be used to give you agency-specific validations down in that validation pane. So those opportunities will now default to FDA and HRSA, and of course you can select them as you need to as well. In the ongoing improvements happening with Forms E that were released last winter, there are a number of validation changes that we have made either because NIH has made changes, which is the case of the inclusion of women, minorities, and children attachment. NIH has made some pretty significant updates to how they want that validated, and so we've taken NIH's logic and built that into Cayuse 424. And then when you look at the other items like the inclusion enrollment report and minimum and maximum age data, we've taken very helpful suggestions from Cayuse 424 users to strengthen the validations in those areas to guide you to fully entering those areas to give you a complete submission. Next, we made some changes that have to do with NSF, specifically around participant support costs and in support of the 2 months per year budget maximum. We've also made a lot of changes across the board for NIH, NIFA, Department of Ed, and SAMHSA. And then, as I mentioned before, a number of validation enhancements for attachments to increase usability, stability, and consistency. I know what I'm telling you here is pretty high level, but if you take a look at the release notes, you'll see more information in detail about what has actually changed in these different areas. So I've been talking quite a bit about attachments. It became very clear to us that there were a number of aspects of attachments that we needed to improve. And so basically what ended up happening is that we took all of the different pieces of feedback we were getting from 424 users about ways that attachments needed improvement or needed fixing, and we grouped them all together and looked at them globally along with our user experience designer to really globally address how we can make attachments better in Cayuse 424 across the board. And so a few of the things that we did, one is that the attachment points have been labeled PDF and SRC, which stands for source. This made a lot of sense when agencies were much more focused on PDF attachments being the only kind of attachment that could be submitted. As more and more agencies are allowing, and in some cases requiring non-PDFs, labeling that attachment point PDF didn't make sense anymore. Also, more and more users at Cayuse 424 institutions have permission to upload non-PDF attachments. And so we've heard loud and clear that, when you're in our application and you need to upload an Excel document, it's very confusing about where do you put that Excel document if the attachment points are called PDF and source. So given all of that, we've changed our terminology to final and draft to clarify the purpose of those attachment points. So in the same spot where PDF has been, you will now see the term final. And in the same spot where you were seeing SRC or source, you're now going to see draft. The functionality has not changed, but the terminology has. We're also displaying metadata, which will make a little bit more sense when I show you the demo, but we're working very hard to make the attachments process both more understandable and helpful to the person who's actually doing an attachment, as well as to anyone who's reviewing after it's been uploaded. We've made formatting improvements throughout to make attachments easier to read and understand. And again, we're really focusing hard on making a more user-friendly, consistent, and stable user experience. And as I mentioned before, we've collected a lot of feedback from customers about ways that they would like attachments to be improved. And this is just a partial list of those institutions that provided really helpful feedback. So to anyone who's on this list, let me just thank you publicly now for giving us those ideas. And anyone who has further ideas, again, we really do take your feedback very seriously, and we work hard to meet your needs. So please don't ever hesitate to let us know when you wish something worked a little bit differently, or so we know that information and can make those changes. So the last thing I want to show you before we move into the live demo is a little reminder of what an example page with a bunch of attachments looks like. So that way we've all got this in our minds when we take a look at the improvements. And without further ado, let's transition to that live demo. All right. So I am currently logged in as kind of a sample faculty member who does not have permission to upload non-PDF attachments. So the first thing I just wanted to briefly show you is in real life, some of that package ID information we saw earlier in the presentation. So if we take a look over here, you can see that when you go to the opportunities page, there's now a column for package ID. If you want to search for package ID, of course you can just type it in, but I'm gonna just do a copy and paste for quick entry. And you can see here that that search logic works for package ID as well. You can sort, you can do a download by package ID if you'd like to. And you'll notice that as you look at grants.gov opportunities, they will almost always include package ID in that announcement. So that's a piece of data you maybe haven't paid attention to before that you may want to start just paying a little bit more attention to now, although there's nothing required about it. And then you'll also notice throughout CITES 424 that whenever you click on one of these little eye icons for more information about an opportunity, that package ID is now part of what's displayed. So you'll always have easy access to that piece of data in the event that that is helpful or necessary for you. So let's jump into a proposal. We took a look just a minute ago at the current state of the PHS 398 research plan form page. And so since we looked at that one before, let's look at that one again now with the improvements made. And of course, you will see this throughout the application on any form page that includes attachments. So again, to summarize some of those changes I talked about before, now instead of seeing PDF in the attachment point on the left, you're now going to see final. And instead of source or SRC, you're now going to see draft for the attachment point on the right. When you don't have an attachment for a particular attachment point yet, you'll see that it's going to say no final, no draft, and that the term over here is going to be add, and that delete is inactive. And that's because we don't want to make you think there is something to delete by having an active button there and then tell you that, sorry, you can't actually delete anything. We're really being careful about only presenting you with options that are valid options at the current state. And then you'll notice down here, when you do actually have an attachment added, whether it just be a draft or a final or both, that whichever attachment is there is going to show up as a link. For the final attachment point, it will be actually the file name of that attachment that's going to be submitted with your application that will show up as the link. In the event that it's a draft, it will just say the word draft, but it will be linkified as well. So of course you can just click on that to view it. And then you may be noticing here too that below each attachment, we now provide this metadata about the attachment itself. So we can see here in this case that this attachment is one page, it's a PDF, and we can see the file size. So the idea here is that for anyone who's reviewing this application, you don't have to actually open the record to see how many pages it is, how big it is, or even the file type. You can do a very quick review just by scanning through that leftmost column to see the information that you would want to know about your final attachments, and then of course open anything that warrants opening, but you should have to open things quite a bit less now because of how much information we've got right up there on the page. Now for uploads that are not PDFs, we're not able to inspect them quite as well and provide quite as much information. So you'll see here in this example that because this is a Word document, we're just able to display the fact that it is a docx file type, not give you file size and page count. So there will be times you don't see all 3 pieces of data, but every time we are programmatically able to find that information, we will be displaying that here on the page. And you'll also notice here that once something's been uploaded, we now have the add button changed to manage and the delete button is active to indicate to you that updates are possible to something that pre-exists, and also that you can delete something because there is something to delete. As I scroll down here a little bit, I want to show you some of the improvements we've made to lists of attachments, and the appendix here is a great example of that. One of the improvements that we've made here is that we've changed how lists of attachments are reordered. Our previous method was all these little arrows over here. And not only was that a pretty hard way to take something from the 10th place up to the 1st place by lots and lots of clicking, the very act of doing so would actually sometimes break attachment points because of the rapid fire clicking that was happening within the application. So we haven't lost the functionality to reorder lists of attachments, we're just doing it differently now. So I want you to just take a look with me. I've got this attachment just literally called attachment 1 that's in the number 5 position. If I just change that number to 1 and hit enter, that attachment is now up there in the number 1 position. And you can also click on these arrows to do reordering as well. This is a much easier and much more stable way to do reordering. And so you'll see this functionality throughout the application in lists of attachments. All right, so speaking of attachments, right now you're just seeing what I've already uploaded, but let's actually do a couple of attachment uploads to see how that process has been improved. So what I'm going to do here is click this add button. You'll notice that the upload dialog looks a little bit different too. Again, we've still got final and draft in the same relative locations to each other as PDF and source, but we've got our updated terminology in here. The upload button is inactive because I haven't actually uploaded, I haven't actually put anything in there yet to upload into my application. And just like before, I can upload a file, a final, or a draft, or both. So what I'm going to do here is just upload a sort of standard PDF and a Word document. And we can see here that we have our file name of the sponsor attachment that's shown up to be editable with the file type shown up in gray behind it. Because of course you're not changing the file type here, you just have the ability to change your attachment file name. And the draft information down below, the upload button is active. You can click that and you can see that they're all there with the metadata displaying down below. But of course, one of the big value points of Cayuse 424 is to catch things that aren't standard and actually shouldn't be allowed into the application. So let's take a look at a couple of those. So first of all, when I upload into that final sponsor slot, a PDF that includes a non-ASCII character. In this case, there's our character right there. I'm going to click open. And you can see here that I can't actually complete the upload quite yet because I have a disallowed character. And so this is, I think, very easy to see on the screen. It's changed color. It tells me exactly down below what my issue is. And you can see that the upload button is not active. But as soon as I go in here and remove my character, the upload button is now there. I fixed my attachment name to be something that is valid to be imported, and I can click the button, and there it is. Let's also take a look at uploading a file. Actually, let's do a file type that's not supported. So this is a person who doesn't have the ability to upload non-PDF documents, and also I'm doing this within an NIH application. So let's start that upload process, and I'm immediately given a warning that tells me that my system configuration doesn't allow me to upload this kind of attachment, and encourages me to ask a Cayuse 424 administrator from my institution for help if this attachment does indeed need to be uploaded. So we've done a lot of work to refine the language that appears in each of these different cases, because there are so many different permutations of what is and is not allowed based on sponsor and the user's role, based on system configuration. All right, and last but not least, let's take a look at how we are now enforcing character limit. So I've just uploaded a PDF that has 50 characters in it. And what we can see here is, again, just like with the non-ASCII character, it's in red, it's showing me the message down below, telling me what my issue is. The reason that we've done this is that we really weren't providing the kind of support we felt that we should be providing to help you have submittable file names. NIH requires that file names do not exceed 50 characters. There are other agencies that do as well. And there's just a general grants.gov recommendation that you do not submit applications that exceed 50 characters. Now, of course, you're probably noticing I'm talking about the number 50. The page tells you the number 36. So let's talk about how we arrived at 36. So part of it is that we take up 4 to 5 characters just with the file extension alone. So in this case, the .pdf is 4 characters, and of course, you can't just take a file extension out of your file, so that's going to use up 4 of those characters right away. Also, it's a grants.gov requirement that every attachment be unique, that it have a unique file name. And so for many years now, Cayuse 424 has tacked on a 10-digit uniqueifier number to the end of every single attachment. So that way, if you do happen to upload attachments with the exact same file name, we protect you from failing submission because they are the same, because we keep them different because of those numbers we stick on the back of there. So the 10 digits plus the 4 digits gives us a maximum user entered character limit of 36. And every once in a while, we only hear reports of this a couple times a year, sometimes not even that often. There'll be a requirement in a funding opportunity announcement telling you a specific file name to use. When that is the case, just use the starts with logic. So have it start with the first 36 characters of whatever that requirement is, because agencies just use those for bookmarking. And so as long as it starts with the same, you will meet their requirement and have this bookmarked correctly. So that's the reasoning behind all of this. Now let's talk about how we fix the issue. So just like with the special character, you're going to take a look at what that message tells you, and you can go in here and we literally give you the option of just hitting delete. And once you've hit delete enough times and you get to 36 characters, the red's going to go away and your attachment name is going to be just fine. So it's a very easy way to get to that starts with logic. But of course, in any of these cases, you can also completely delete this and rename it to whatever it is. you want that attachment to be without having to do a re-upload. So there's our attachment in place. Okay, so we've taken a look a little bit at some of those validations that come into play when you're attaching one file at a time. As people may know, and we really want to emphasize this if you don't already know, there are two different cases where we support you being able to complete a PDF form offline, uploading attachments to that PDF form, and then importing everything all together. And the two places where that is supported is the PHS 398 Human Subjects Clinical Trial Information Form Study Record, and the subaward budget. In the case of the subaward budget, the only file that can be imported is the budget justification, because anything else that would potentially be an attachment on a subaward record, we actually generate for you. So since there's only one attachment to show there, I really prefer to show off what's going on over here in the study record because there is just so much more to see. So if you were to want to use this functionality, you basically just need to get your hands on a fillable PDF form, and you can do that by downloading a form from Assist, from Workspace, or from the Grants.gov Forms repository. You fill that form out offline and then import that into Cayuse 424. So let's actually take a look at that when it comes to play with the human subject study record. So what I'm going to do here is click Import Study, and I'm going to choose my file. And I'm going to choose a sample human subject study record that includes attachments. And of course, you can call this whatever you want to as well. And I'm going to now import that in. And this import has worked earlier. What we have made some changes to, however, is how this page is styled, the kind of options that you have. And we've significantly really overhauled the validations that happen on here, because unfortunately, this was actually allowing people who did not have permission to upload non-PDFs, kind of a backdoor way to be able to do that. And of course, the intention is to provide people with the same validation logic, regardless of what method they're using to actually get data into Cayuse 424. So let's briefly talk through what you're seeing here. First of all, you see the study title, and what's been imported in here is the study title that I had in my PDF. And at this point, you can either edit that or not. It's a really big text box, and that's because this is a really big character limit, so you can have a very long study title. I believe it's 600 characters. Then as we scroll down, this is where you really notice big improvements over what we had before. We now have very specific validation information coming at you about every attachment that is on that PDF form I just uploaded. So let's just talk through this. The first thing is we have all the attachments that are valid for inclusion. The first attachment I have in there for the inclusion of women, minorities, and children is perfectly fine the way it is. I can still change the file name if I want, but there's no indicator that I need to do anything differently. The other two examples are the exact same attachments that I showed you on a single upload earlier, because I think it's important to see that we're dealing with them the exact same way here. So again, we have the same message telling us about the special character and the same ability just to go in, do that delete, and now it's back to normal, to sort of the valid state, back to normal again. The next is our message about the 36 character limit that's been exceeded. So just like I did before, I'm just going to keep deleting here until I've met my 36 character limit, and it is now uploadable as well. Then as we look down here just a little bit more, we can see this warnings area, and this is telling me about attachments on my PDF that actually can't be imported. One of them cannot be imported because it's actually a spreadsheet, and so I have a message telling me it's not a PDF, and it's giving me the file name that includes the file extension, further emphasizing the fact that this is not a PDF. And then down here, I also have a fillable PDF, which is a PDF with active fields, and this is not allowed as well. So I have my messages telling me exactly which attachments won't be included and why. and some information about how I can actually get them in there if I need to. And at this point, I can confirm import. And everything that I was told was going to be included has been included. Everything I was told would not be included has not been included. And we're now brought into a study record within Cayuse 424 that includes all of the information that was in that PDF minus anything I was told could not be included. And so as we scroll down here, we can start to see those attachments. And again, the metadata for those attachments is displayed as well. So we've gotten good feedback from users already that this has been really helpful functionality within 424. And our goal is to make this even more useful for you now that we have better validations to guide people to understand what it is we're doing and prevent people from doing things that aren't actually allowed either by their sponsor or their configuration. So I talked a little bit before about helping out people who are reviewers. Certainly what we just focused on right now is the upload process. So as far as review goes, I just want to emphasize again that anything, actually that's not a good example. Let me go back to the research plan page just because it is so rich with attachments. So not only can reviewers just simply take a look at the form itself and see a lot more useful information than you can right now. We have many more validations that show up down here in the validation pane. So I'm just going to scroll down a little bit to show you a few of them. So we are generating these attachments programmatically and very consistently throughout Cayuse 424. So here's an example where, and some of these already existed, some of them are new, but I want to just kind of show them to you as a whole to get a better sense of what's provided. So in this case, we can see that a final attachment exists, but the form is not included for submission. So we're using the fact that an attachment exists there to indicate that most likely you actually want to check this box to include it. Certainly not a requirement, but it's us trying to help you catch what could be a potential omission that was not intended. Similarly, we have this here where it says a draft document exists, but a final attachment is missing. Again, questioning if that was really your intention. And when I click on this, of course, the yellow highlighting shows exactly which attachment point we're talking about here. The next one here is about a final attachment point that is a fillable PDF. The user I'm logged in as right now doesn't have the ability, doesn't have the right to upload a final PDF, but based on your system configurations, sysadmins and different user groups could actually have the ability to upload those kinds of documents. So of course we want to support the upload, but we also want to keep reminding you that it's in there so it doesn't slip through the cracks if it's actually something that shouldn't be there. So we've actually got a couple different fillable PDFs in there. So not only is that information down in the validation pane, but also when we go over and do our validate proposal for the pre-submission checks, we've added additional information about attachments to this window. And because this is a test record, I've actually got quite a few errors that we're not going to worry about. But let's focus down here on the bottom. In this case, I have fillable PDF attachments. They have been detected. So I've got my header telling me about those attachments and giving me both the file name and the form that they're located on. So this is just yet another, hey, are you sure you actually want this kind of attachment in your proposal? And we're catching both fillable PDFs and non-PDF attachments in this way. None of these will prevent submission, so they're not here as hard stop errors. They're simply there as informational, so that way, again, you are really sure before you submit that you know from us if they're fillable PDFs or non-PDFs in this attachment, and you can make that determination if you want to continue with submission or you want to stop and make some changes. All right. Next, let's take a brief look at the supporting documents page. This actually used to just be called documents, but we've done a brief renaming and just put the word supporting in there to really emphasize the purpose of this page. And what you can see here is the same kind of user experience improvements as there are throughout the forms in CAIS 424. It's just in this case, we're looking at the page that allows you to upload internal only documents that are not part of the submission. Because this is a list, you've got those same reordering options that we looked at before. In this case, however, we've really relaxed the validations because we're not trying to submit to grants.gov from anything on this page. So, in this case, having a special character, having a longer file name, these things are just fine. And you're going to be able to add, manage, and delete here the same way that you would. You see the same metadata that you would within the forms. So the idea here is to give you the same functionality, but lessen the restrictions, since again, this page exists for internal purposes. So that's kind of an overview in general of what's changed. I also want to show you a couple very specific changes that you will only see depending on the type of application you're submitting. So in this case, I have a sample opportunity that includes the 3 new taxpayer forms that I mentioned earlier that are now part of CAIS 424. These are the forms that are not filled out as frequently by 424 users. So rather than give full form support, this is the method where you would actually download a fillable PDF, complete it offline, and upload it back into the system, and then we take the data out of it and include it in your submission. That process has not changed. What we have done, however, is we've improved the actual experience you have with that process. So we've very carefully rewritten these instructions to make them easier to follow. We've gotten feedback that people have a hard time finding the form that actually needs to be downloaded and submitted. So we've actually provided a link to that form in 2 different places. We're giving you instructions about how to get Adobe Reader if you don't have it, and how to flatten the form. Because in this process, which is a little different than throughout the rest of CAIS 424, you're actually submitting a fillable form because that's how we get the data into your submission. But if you want to include this form when you print your proposal to PDF, you also need to include a printable version, which is a flattened version of the form. And so you can see here, and that, again, that process has not changed. We've just improved how we explain it. So what you can see here is that I have my fillable version that's been uploaded. I do not have a printable version. And again, I have the option to manage and delete. And if I look at one where nothing's been uploaded yet, we have those placeholders of no fillable version, no printable version. And whether I click Add or Manage, we get a modified attachment dialog to give us some specific guidance when it comes to this kind of an attachment. But again, keeping the functionality as similar as possible throughout the rest of CAIS 424, including the order of the sponsor version on top, the internal version on the bottom, and the upload being inactive until it's time to upload. Okay, a couple more examples. We also got some really good feedback about how to improve the manage key person within CAIS 424. I'm going to show that to you within an NSF example, but certainly you would see this within any proposal that you looked at. Previously, we have included up in here the ability to upload your biosketch as you're managing the person within this window. What we have added is also the ability to upload and manage current and pending support. And in the event that it's an NSF proposal, you will also see the option for the NSF COA, the collaborators and other affiliations. So we've made those same UI improvements. So sorry for the cough. And anything that you upload or manage within this dialog is going to show up down there in the form. So let's actually add a current and pending support right here. So we can see here now that I've added that. If I go in and take a look at my person, we can see that whatever attachments we've modified up there in the top show up down at the bottom. And of course you can manage from here as well. It's just the feedback we got was, as long as you can do the biosketch up on top, why not be able to do it down below? And actually I think, there we go. I opened up the wrong person, sorry about that. Now you can see that biosketch blank format file name that I just uploaded. I also just wanted to mention that we have softened the color of purple that shows up on here. We didn't want to change the color on you, so you could still refer to this as the purple section if indeed you do, but we've made the color a little bit softer so it's not quite so bright when you open this up. All right, so the last thing I want to mention before we jump into questions is that you're going to see a little bit of a hybrid approach when you're looking at proposals that have attachments that were uploaded before the change, as well as proposals that include older form versions. So if I take a look at this proposal here, and why not go to the research plan? So this is an example of attachments that were uploaded prior to the release. You can see here that we're still benefiting from the page being reformatted. We've got the no final, no draft. We have the linked file name for the final attachment. What is missing, however, is the file size. And that's because we find the file size on upload. And since this was uploaded before we applied the change, the file size just isn't going to display. It's going to show up with the 2 dots as a placeholder. There's absolutely no problem with this. But if you did want to see the file size, what you could do is just re-upload the attachment, and the actual upload process following the update is what will have that piece of data show up on the page. But just want you to know why it's not showing up, so it doesn't appear to be a problem. It's just because this was something that was uploaded prior to the change. And then last but not least, this is an opportunity from, I think, 2012 that gives us kind of a sense of that hybrid I talked about before, about how with older form versions, you're going to see some flavors of the changes that we've made, while you're also going to see some areas that look like the old way. Everything's been well tested and we haven't found any issues. It's been fully functional. It's just wanted to mention this so people aren't surprised that you're seeing a little bit of the old mixed in with a little bit of the new. And now, without further ado, I turn back to my friend Carlos for questions from our users.
Well, thank you, Bess, and thank you for taking us through all of that. If you do have questions, please put them into the Q&A feature of the webinar. We have a few that came in over the course of the talk there, so I'll just kind of touch upon those briefly. One of them is just a logistical thing. Again, if you came in late or if you know somebody who had to leave early for any reason, we are, again, recording this webinar and it will be posted to the Help Center so that you can reference it in the future. We had one question, Bess, about where to find the package ID for an opportunity. And I believe that's in reference to external to Cayuse. Where would one locate that piece of identifying information so that you could look it up or download an opportunity based on the package ID? And it's my understanding that would be on grants.gov.
Yeah, if you look at an opportunity on grants.gov, there's a field called package ID that's actually been there for quite some time, I think at least a year. I can't say exactly when they started to introduce that logic, but you probably just didn't notice it before because there's a lot of information on there that isn't necessarily something you need to know as an applicant.
Right.
So my guess is if you go back and look at those opportunities again, that you'll notice that package ID is there now that it's something that actually means something.
Perfect. And then we actually had a couple of people request another little element of the demo.
Okay.
People wanted to see what it looked like when we click on the Manage button.
Oh, absolutely.
For an attachment.
Good question. So back into my front of the research plan. So if we click on manage, we're actually going to see the same window that you see on upload, except that it also shows you the current file name of the final attachment. And at this point, you can change the final attachment, add a draft, change the draft, whatever it is you need to do at this point in order to adjust what's in there as opposed to starting from scratch or deleting.
Awesome. It doesn't look like we have any other active questions, and I don't want to keep you guys waiting around. You know that there's plenty to do today for all of us. So if there is anything that comes up, you think of anything, please just get in touch with support. You can give us a call, send us an email at support@cayuse.com, or visit the Help Center at support.cayuse.com. And again, the release notes are already posted to the support site, and we will have the recording of this webinar posted there as well. We did have a question here, and I'm not sure if we'll be able to demo this right now, but do we have an example of an attachment that is over page limit and what that looks like when it is being...
Oh, so if you attach over the page limit, we actually haven't made any changes as far as that goes. Those are agency-specific validations, and what I've shown you here is a little bit more global in nature. So if, for example, you have an area where you know, file size or page count can just be 4 pages, you would see basically the same validation you would see now that would tell you down in the validation pane that you've exceeded the limit. But what will help you with that as well is you will be able to see right here on the screen what that page count is, just for, you know, again, extra information. But with that particular example, we haven't made any changes to how we're validating those. The only thing about those kind of page count validations that's a little bit tricky is that if it's kind of a one-off and it's not something an agency has made standard that we've been able to encode standardly, that's not the kind of thing we can report back. But that's where I think reviewing this metadata is going to be so key, is that now, whether we know in enough detail to actually make a validation for it, you're going to be able to hone right in, check the thing you're concerned about without actually having to open it and literally count the number of pages.
Right. And we had a sort of clarifying question about the ability to change an attachment name. Mm-hmm. So we saw definitely that it can be changed at the point of upload.
Yes.
Is it set at that point?
It is set at that point. It is something that we took a look at as we were working on the release. And because of the way that we store attachments, we found that at least at this time, it really wasn't we couldn't support the ability to just rename attachments on the fly after they've been uploaded. It's something that we're keeping in our backlog to revisit as we, you know, continue to, of course, continually improve 424. But at this point, renaming of attachment names can only happen at the point of upload. And so if you did need to rename an attachment after it's been uploaded, you would upload it again.
Okay. We had a question that I think I might be able to answer about whether the reorder option for the attachment section is similar functionality with the routing chain. But I believe with the routing chain, do you have the drop down, or is it an arrow?
I don't have anything routing in this. I just don't have a great example stage. Sure. What I should mention though is that we did not get rid of those little arrows throughout all of Cayuse 424. You will still see the reordering arrows in some places. In fact, let me just add another person here. you'll see here, for example, that we still do have those small arrows on the page. We really were careful to not have some of the scope creep we were tempted to have with this release, and really focus on header 2, making the updates you asked for, and really focusing on attachment improvements throughout the application. So there certainly still are some arrows kind of this nature in there that we want to keep paying attention to and improving as we go. So that reordering that we did is really limited to attachment reordering. Again, largely because we were focused on attachments in this release, and because it was attachment reordering that was breaking things for people. And of course, anything that causes the application to stop working is a very serious concern for us.
Certainly. I think that's all that we have right now. So why don't we...
Can I actually do a quick temperature check? Because we do have that raise hand function, if you feel like this release is going to improve your experience within Cayuse 424, would you click that for us? We can just get a sense of what you think.
We've got a lot of raised hands, Bess.
Okay, that's fantastic. I know I said this at the beginning, but I just really cannot emphasize enough that the inspiration for the changes that we made to attachments in particular was really because of feedback that we got from our users. And we want to keep making 424 better every single time we put out a release and make it more usable, stable, functional for everyone who uses it. So I appreciate that feedback. And please don't hesitate. Let us know if there's something you'd like to see changed. And honestly, if there's something you really like a lot too, we'd love to hear that as well. Yeah, we're constantly collecting feedback and prioritizing it and working to do the things that matter to you most.
All right, well, thank you everyone for attending today. And thank you, Bess, for taking us through the new release. It's coming this Saturday. And again, any questions, just follow up with us at support. Have a great day.